about working from home and the COVID time, which I think half of the presentation now into the HR space are about working from home or working from office. But okay, if you want, I will spend some time in the end also talking about this subject, because as I promised, some subjects will be also from the area of what is the impact of COVID-19 on the talent acquisition. Some agenda and aims. So first, I want to say, why did I choose to talk about talent acquisition? Okay, first reason is because I saw into the curricula of Hull University at the MBA, and I think it was something which I wanted to talk about. Second is because talking about my career and experience, I think that one of the specialization which I had in all these 25 years, one of the most dominant was in the talent acquisition. I spent almost 5 years in IBM on a role of talent acquisition leader for Central Eastern Europe, in which basically I had 28 countries, had around 140 recruiters into my team, and hiring volume by year of around 8,000 hires per year. So when you are having 8,000 hires per year, you see a lot of things. So I said that maybe it would be good to choose my first topic here of talking about talent acquisition. So I think that the other reason why I wanted to talk about talent acquisition is because it's a permanent subject. It's a permanent subject on our agenda. And I think now, as into the past, it's a subject of high interest, and then to continue to be. The agenda and aims, I'll talk about some historical positioning. Yeah, it'll be a bit of, if you want, of syntax, because we are using now this term of talent acquisition. Is this something different than recruitment or sourcing? Is just a fancy word? I'll move then of talking about which are the role and the capabilities, in fact, of a modern talent acquisition terms. Then I will spend quite a lot of time into the current world of practices and technology into the talent acquisition. So I welcome here the ninjas which are on the call on the talent acquisition to challenge me and to give me new examples which I don't know. And then I'll talk about some examples, you know, of influences into talent acquisition, particularly the influences which are coming from the agile movement. And this is something which I experienced firsthand into my last years in IBM. For sure, I'll spend a little bit of time on the impact of COVID on the talent acquisition. A term which I borrow from the hard problem of consciousness, and which I called the hard problem of artificial intelligence, prospects and limits. And I'll have a personal view on that. And for sure, questions. By the way, because I think 40 minutes for a formal presentation is quite long, I suggest to choose a moment in the middle of my presentation in which to take a little break and answer some questions, because otherwise maybe to wait until the end of the presentation, it will be quite a long time. And I would appreciate your support to watch my time, because I have a talent to talk a lot and I have a lot of slides in this evening. Thank you very much. So we are talking about talent acquisition as something which is very modern, but in fact, even from the time of the Roman Empire, we had a term called dilectus, which basically was how the Romans, they recruit their soldiers. Rome wanted the best of them. And they had a lot of practice, you know, which you can say that they are a real qualification check. In order to be in the Roman army, you need to be a citizen, you need to know Latin, you need to know how to write and read. Latin because you need to know how to execute the orders. For sure, you need to be in the good physical form. And also, what a surprise, you need also to pass a probation, you know, you need to pass a number of tests. So this is not something so new that you'd expect. I discovered that even a practice of employee referral was in time of Julius Caesar. So they paid around 300 sesterces, which is quite a significant amount of their salary at that time, in order to recommend other soldiers for this job. For up, if you went of a industrial era, very much recruitment was a single sign, we are hiring, yeah. And I think that even today you can see on some posts on recruiters on the LinkedIn or the things which are saying, I'm hiring today. Up to the 90s, mostly recruitment was about job ads. And here there are some vintage examples, of how the recruitment looks in those years. Starting with 900, a new entity appeared, which was the agency. It's considered that the first, what you called an executive search agency, was founded in 1926 by a person called Thorndike Deland Sr., which founded the first agency into the world. Here it's a quite of extensive list, if you want, of a first history of how the major executive search companies appeared into the world. You can see here quite familiar names like Ward Howell, like Struggles, which then founded Heydrich and Struggles, and Corn Ferry and Spencer Stewart and Russell Reynolds. So this was old executive search company, which, quite funny enough, if you look now into a top of major executive search company into the world, you will see that these names are still there, and in fact they are the major executive search companies into the world. Maybe one single exception, which is not on this original list, it's Egon Zehnder, which is also one of the biggest executive search companies now into the world. As a matter of fact and information, none on these big executive search companies in the world are not present in Romania with an office. And maybe this is saying something about the volume and the value of executive search in Romania, but time to time they have operations in Romania and they're doing some search. For Romania, I think that the major executive search companies will be names like Amrop, Peterson and Partners, and Stanton Chase, and Accord. By the way, I want to make an early declaration of interest. I'm not supporting necessarily, or I will not say a name of a technology of a company. It's like a disclaimer. I'm not selling anything in this evening. I just want to illustrate time to time some technologies or mention some companies from whom I work. And for sure, I might have some preferences time to time. This was somehow a day in my life in 1997 to see from where we started into this field. I mentioned 1997 because this was my first year when I started as a recruiter into an agency. And at that time, and the images which I put here are quite representative of those era. So we work on a computer at that time, yeah, in 1997. But I don't think that you could call it that it was still a digital era, because at that time we didn't yet use an email. If you can imagine, at that time the majority of applications come via postmail in envelopes, and via the machine which is below, which I don't know, for people which are younger if they can recognize, it's a fax machine. Which was something very new at that time. So basically, it was quite fancy at that moment to send an application via a fax machine and not using a computer. So no digital, or maybe if you consider that the fax machine was a form of digitization of information. And sometimes the results was quite bad. People which remember that the fax machine have sometime the bad habit, to jam. So sometimes you can see a profile coming of a person with a strange photo due to the jamming and all those things. What is surprising is that you can wonder, looking at that time, and you can ask yourself how that is possible that we are still successful in terms of recruitment practices which we had at the time. It was even, I would say, much more harder because we didn't had access to internet, to LinkedIn, to a lot of other information. So the typical agency work at the time was between a consultant and a researcher. And the role of a researcher was quite interesting because the researcher was supposed to give names and profiles. And imagine how hard it was in the 1997 without internet, without LinkedIn, to find names, to find relevant names beside the people which applied at the time. So the role of a researcher was to look into different magazines and to try to call different companies, bypass office assistants, find telephones, and then provide you a list of names which you will call, and you start, in fact, you'll start the work. So it's quite a challenging, it was quite a challenging time. And please keep in mind the question, if now using the digital and all the world of technology which are using, if it's a more productive work than the work in that time. And it's not a nostalgic question. I cannot be accused of nostalgia, but I think that we did a pretty good work in those times. Here, I wanted to show a bit of digital history, and these are the major evolution, if you want, in time of digital technologies into the talent acquisition. And for sure is not a complete list. I'm quite sure that some people will say, yeah, you didn't include that company or these things. There are some just names in order to populate the list. So I think that the first, in fact, technology which happened into the talent acquisition come at the end of the 80s. So basically, with the arrival of applicant tracking systems, which now you are calling ATS systems. So it was the start also of first, if you want, human resource information systems. And here you can see the PeopleSoft, which started one of the first worldwide human resource information system, which after that was bought by Oracle. So we had here the names at the beginning of 97 of Kenexa, and Taleo, which was one of the most well-known names at that time into applicant tracking system. Basically, what did the applicant tracking system? It was a way to collect your information, the applicants, put into the structured way, create flows, for approval inside the company, and make postings, on the first job boards. In the same time, you can see in 1994 and 1995, the major job boards into the world, like Monster and Career Builder, which was something quite new, a place, which you can position, in fact, all your digital application. At that time, in practice, if you want the name of a game and the obsession of recruiters at that time was to collect as much as possible applications into the database, create a lot of filters, because they wanted to collect all the relevant information about applicants in order then to do the nirvana of a talent acquisition, if you want. Just search in your database and find, using the proper filters, the right candidates. So somehow at that time, it was the first time when the company started to dream that in one moment we will not need agencies anymore, that will have huge databases which we can access. And everybody in a deployment that of talent acquisition systems, when recruiters were in charge to choose the systems and configure the systems, they wanted 1,000 of filters and information about their candidates. I think that the biggest shock into the talent acquisition, and it's significantly that it's even today one of the most dominant, in fact, way to do recruitment is LinkedIn. LinkedIn first came in 2003, yeah, and nobody expected at that time that it would be such a dominant, in fact, player. Even today, it's one of the most important job boards because it's considered to be into the category of a job boards. There are some versions of LinkedIn in other countries. In Germany, it's Zing. It's also in France, some of local, and Russia also have some of their version of LinkedIn, particularly because in Russia they are not allowed to host the information of candidates on LinkedIn servers which are staying outside the country. LinkedIn was a major shock into the history of applicant tracking systems. Why? Because suddenly you had a place in which you have all your candidates somehow live. You don't need any more, to go on your applicant tracking system and try to find your 30,000 CVs, which you have there, which many times become anyhow obsolete. Yeah. So LinkedIn was a shock, but even today, there are some people in talent acquisition which they try to build huge databases into the applicant tracking systems, and they ignore the fact that LinkedIn somehow simplifying, the death of a classical applicant tracking system. I think that the latest shock, if you want, is the GDPR. The fact that you cannot store for a long term, in fact, your application which you get into the company, even more, it's a kind of sign that the world of a big applicant tracking systems is not anymore something to be. But they're still there, they're still there, adapting and somehow adding new features. I think Facebook was also a major moment into 2004. It was not initially an important place for talent acquisition, but I think year by year it started to play a more important role. Now, to be honest, even now Facebook is not, and this is my personal opinion. I know that there are some people on the call which are using, in fact, and the technology is using Facebook as a major thing. But even now, Facebook is not what I would say the major dominant place to collect candidates. When I work in IBM, year by year, we were announced like, be aware, next year Facebook will come. Each year, I looked at Facebook, but it didn't happen. Twitter also was in some moments considered to be quite a major and important quick communication tool with employees, which didn't happen so much. YouTube in 2005, it's quite important to mention here because it's used in employment branding and positioning of a company's a good tool. Workday, I wanted to mention here because it's one of the newcomers if you went into the applicant tracking systems. And personally, I consider to be one of the most intuitive, if you want, and easy to work as an applicant tracking systems. On the upper side of the slide, I mentioned HireVue in 2004. HireVue is one of a well-known name in video interview technology, and this is something which grew year by year. And I think in our days of COVID and pandemics, the video technologies are starting to move even more faster. I mentioned on this slide in terms of digital history, biometrics, and this not it's a random thing because it's quite an important name into the gamification, which is a trend which also happened into the last years over 2000. Then on the last side, I think that the newcomers in the last years are companies like Talentbeam, Guild, Entelo, and Pipeler. And these are the new generation, if you want, of what is called people aggregators. Basically, what is doing a people aggregator platform? It's collecting and it's establishing a profile of an applicant from different sources, many times from the open net. So basically, they take information from Google, from databases, from different other things, and they form a coherent profile, which many times not using information from LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is quite egotistic and doesn't want to open the access for nothing. Also, this type of people aggregators, which started in US and into the IT segment, they're also giving quite sophisticated algorithms, and sometimes even they're assessing the quality of a software which is produced by the candidates. One, if you want, of the latest things which appear in the last years, there are kind of platforms like Glicken and Spencer and other names, which are what we are calling the people experience platforms, where basically they are following, the candidates in your applications and onboarding and giving a lot of experiences which are borrowed, in fact, from marketing. I didn't include here in this slide the big world of chatbots, which I think that are hundreds and thousands applications on the chatbots area. I just want to mention here, because I saw that Livio it's on the call. One of the most interesting chatbots which I saw on Romanian market, it's Dora, the Happy Recruiter, which basically we will also give a bit of demonstration in this evening. Now, the question is, are we now entirely digital into 2020? You'll be surprised to find out that not 100%. This is a job ad from New Scientist from UK, and this is from a number from 1 month ago. It's true, it's less present now, but you can still see even in Financial Times, look, it's a director role positioned by Spencer Stewart. So there are still some, older style into the things, but I think that they'll vanish maybe into the next year. So we are not, I would say, totally outside of a physical thing. Now, in order to clarify a bit of terminology and the terms, because you can see a lot of articles and people saying, talent acquisition is something different than recruitment, because recruitment is about vacancies, talent acquisition is something more complex, it's about the entire line. Honestly, let's be very clear, it's just a term. It's a fancy term, it's a term which is used very popular now into all the job titles. But if you look on the LinkedIn and try to search, you'll still see that recruitment is still more prevalent than talent acquisition. So if you ask me, it's just a matter to market yourself on a different things. It's about talents. It's about all these things. There are big companies in the world, very progressive, like Facebook, for example, which used a lot the titles of recruitment. Yeah, but for the sake of this presentation, I will use the term talent acquisition, and particularly the abbreviation TA. Sometimes it's worthwhile to repositioning and rebranding your name inside your organization, just to offer the context for a transformation. And you say, from now on, we are not anymore recruiters. We will move to a next stage and we'll call ourselves talent acquisition. Which are the capabilities which I think are important into the role of a modern TA professional? And this is an image which I borrow from the LinkedIn. And I think that it's illustrating quite well the complexity and the demand which is now on the responsibility which a modern talent acquisition needs to have. In fact, it's divided between two sides. One side, it's a much more emphasis on the science, if you want, and particularly on the data science and research and usage of the technology and all the things. And the second, which is called by LinkedIn the artist side, is the old, if you want, way in which to do talent acquisition, like the salesperson, the person which need to sell at the end of the day to the candidate, the job, it's the matchmaker. And I think that it's a continuous, if you want, fight between these two tendencies, and you'll see this into the role of talent acquisitions. There are people which are much more oriented to the area of research and technology and data analysis, and people which are more oriented at sales. Also, I must say, in order to not create an image that the talent acquisition is something which is very sophisticated as a role, I must say, and this is something which I always challenge, there is a tendency sometimes in human resources to consider that talent acquisition or recruitment is the first job which you will take after you did some administration or early stage into the HR. And then people want to move as an HR business partner or other role, which I think is a wrong positioning. I'm not saying that you should stay in this role forever, but I think that the complexity of such a role is quite big, that you require a lot of years in order to develop yourself. I'm illustrating here from my time of IBM, and I use this thing just as an example. Don't worry, unfortunately, I will not show you the entire document because it's under confidential term. This was the product in which I actively contributed to the development. So in 2017, IBM took a very interesting initiative. They brought 12 people. We were to Bangalore in India, and for 1 week we work on the next 2020 capabilities into talent acquisition into IBM. So basically, this is what I consider to be like a kind of good example of what should do a modern talent acquisition team. Basically, and this is an essential message, you can't work in talent acquisition if you don't understand the business in which you work. Without good business knowledge, understanding your area, how can you be able to understand the profiles in which you want to recruit? And sometimes this is an area which I must say, it's still the old sin of an HR, which not so many people were spending a lot of time into understanding the business. There are some specialized businesses like IT, for example, in which it's even impossible, to recruit Java or C++ or understand the differences between old technologies and new technologies if you don't immerse yourself into the business. The second big area, which I think on the business acumen, it's you need to master your talent market. You need to understand the market in which you are working, what is the volume of that market, the potential of that market, and to have access to industry and market intelligence. The second area, I think, is the technical expertise. And here I'm talking about understanding data, analytics, have a digital eminence, knowing how to source, have this strategic sourcing, but in the same time, being able to close and sell, negotiate, and closing. I'm putting a lot of emphasizing on this area because at the end of the day, the role is quite important into the moment in which you are able to present the offer and to sell the offer, to the final candidates. Leadership skills are equally important, like agile communication, influencing. And we thought at that time in IBM that it's very important to develop as well curiosity and creativity and have a growth mindset. Seeing yourself, like an unfinished product, still eager to learn. Just one other example. This is a kind of an overall in much more detail of how we looked at that time. The persona into the middle, the Pasha Starbreak, it's the name which is formed for the initials of our group. I am one of the heirs from that time. So you can see here the way in which we looked at the role. I was very fond of that name. If you look there, of data poet, which I think it will become much and more important into the future, the ability to interpret data and to look at the insights. What is the common job structure and content which you see typically into the talent acquisition? So basically, most of the time, the talent acquisition will be divided between a talent acquisition partner or a specialist and a talent acquisition sourcer. What does it mean? Most of the time, a talent acquisition partner is accountable end-to-end. It's like an account for that role, is the primary contact point with a hiring manager. And as a specialist, it can be also involved into the delivery of that role. While the sourcer or researcher is the primary person, which is the role is to source profile, identify profile against the requirements into the market, find that person, make the first contact. Sometime in bigger organization, you can have also what is called a coordinator or support, which basically is looking on the admin side, reporting and all the things, and also for sure having on top a manager or a leader. This image is present most of the time into large organization. When you have smaller organization, you can see the kind of one person doing one in all, which will be also the partnering side, also the sourcer. Let's move now to what's happening now into the space of technology and practices in talent acquisition. And I borrow this image from the Gartner, which is one of the most important research powerhouse into the world, is the former Corporate Leadership Council, which I liked which I liked a lot into the past, and it was my primary source of information and research into the HR. I recommend you in your fields, if you want to have more access to quality data on research, to go on Gartner and look on all these things. So what is showing these things? First, I want to spend some time on the assessment and selection area. Basically, we have three clusters of things, which are technology and practices which are already used, embedded into the company. So this is the bottom on my slide. Then there are technologies and practices which are now in adoption or short-term usage. So they are not, let's say, things which are already entrenched into the practices of an organization. And the top section is which are the techniques and practices and tools which the majority of the companies in the world now are in experiment phase or in early phase. Color and the size. So first, size, it's showing size of a bubble is showing the current impact. So basically, how important is the perception on them now? And the colors is showing what is the future importance. What is the answer of a majority of executives in talent acquisition in the world about the importance of these practices or technologies into the future? And you can see some disconnections between current impact and future importance. For example, if you look at the online personality test and online ability test, they're considered and they're used for many years into the market. The current impact, it seems that is not so big, and the future importance is quite low. And to be honest, I was quite surprised to see this evolution during the years, because maybe 5 to 10 years ago, I thought that the next game in talent acquisition after the sourcing will be the area. Yeah, I'm getting a message which is saying to give reference for the source I just mentioned is Gartner. I don't know if you can hear the source. If not, I'll send a message. So this is basically the typical personality tests which are used all over the world. There are a lot of tools like DISC, like CPI, which is the California or the old 6PF, and they are very much used in a lot of organization. And the newcomers on these areas are companies, for example, and tools like Tratify, which is quite interesting. I also perform with them a demo to understand what they're doing. And this is showing, in fact, the tendency to simplification. Yeah. So basically, what is doing this kind of Tratify, instead of giving you a huge test with 260 questions like CPA or other things to answer about all these things, is giving you a set of pictures for 90 seconds, like the examples which I'm having here, and you need just to say if this is representing me or not. Me, not me, in a quite of quick succession of images. And based on that is giving you a profile of personality, which is based on the major traits of a personality. Quite interesting. For example, in my case, it seems that my personality, it's an ally, yeah, and it's giving me also a kind of image. What they are doing, basically, they are offering also a kind of matching profile based on these things. So you build your ideal candidate match, how you want to look. And this company, for example, based on this test, is giving you a profile which is saying matching or not matching of these things, which is quite interesting things. In the same time, I must say that I want to explore more tools like that because they belong to an old class of psychological tests which are called projective tests. Like, for example, the most common tool, which you maybe know, is the Rorschach test, the ink test. You need to look at the images, and recognize and think what does it mean for you. And these are tests which are quite difficult to interpret, to be honest. And it's still controversial, the usage of them as true personality tests. But you can see by this, and I wanted to illustrate here, the tendency to simplify the way in which you are taking tests. Ability tests, they are typical example like the old Wechsler adult intelligence to a lot of tests. I put here a lot of examples available in Romania from the central test, which are still in usage. And basically what they're measuring the intelligence things. Thank you, Basav. I saw that you indicate the source of my information from Ghana. Thank you very much. I think that one of the biggest problems which is happening now into the current environment with all the tests and everything, I think, it's the large number of providers. I think it's a real strategy, if you want, and a real challenge. It's how to choose, in fact, the right vendor. There are so many. Just the society, for example, from human resources having a vendor directory when you have 120 companies found just for assessment and testing services. And this is one of the biggest problems now in companies, how to select the right vendor. Why do I think that you can see from that slide a decline in the usage of a personality and online test? I think that partially is because some of them, they are not maybe the right ones. And I must say, I am on the side of the people which are criticizing, for example, some personality tests like Myers-Briggs for the people who use this for the personality point of view. And also, I think that there are just correlation many times. And I think that they're complex, they're hard to interpret. and in the last times, it's quite a tendency which will limit the usage of them. Particularly, personality tests are quite controversial, for example, to say you passed or you didn't pass. Yeah, they can show you a kind of fit, but you cannot say, you know, that it's a personality profile which is really recommended for a job or not recommended. Or if this is happening, it's more at the statistical level and not at the personal level. And I think more and more you can see now in our days the tendency of moving to gamification and more simple tests from all these things. Also, an area which is showing as low for the future is what you call the online situational judgment assessment, which are typical situations which are presented online in which you need to choose a kind of answer to answering to these ones. Surprisingly or not, a practice which was very popular into the past, the so-called hackathons, in which hundreds of people going online to solve problems or create a code. It seems that they are on low importance into the future and they're declining. What is something which I think is now in the experimentation phase and quite interesting, as I mentioned, and with medium importance into the future, there are a new version, if you want, of online test. And a good example is the battery which is provided by Pymetrics. Pymetrics is one of the most famous companies into the world, which is offering this type of gamification. And basically, this is one of my profile, which I took when I was in a selection process 4 years ago for a company at European level. And basically, they are claiming that they're using test based of the latest neuroscience, but in a way which doesn't sound like a test. And I wanted to show you a bit of demonstration on the YouTube, basically what they're doing. So basically what they are doing, this kind of, I'll go back to the presentation. They're putting a lot of classical, if you want, batteries and personality tests and cognitive things, but into a form of gamification. These examples, for example, which I show, is measuring the propensity to risk by showing you, for example, of on exercise in which you are going with a balloon and pump it, and each time if you are putting too much pump, it can explode and you are losing the amount of money. It's measuring you in a very playful way your risk profile. How much do you want to do in order to win, which are sometimes might be important in some type of roles. And I think that this is something which you'll see more into the future. If I'm looking at another type of things, I think it's growing and it's now a real big area, this area of live video interviews. And I think it's explainable also by the COVID time. If you cannot do the interviews in person, it's an important technology to use. Companies like HireView and other things are quite big in this space. But I think that they are somehow diluted by the Microsoft Teams, by Zoom, by other things. Why do you need, in fact, to buy a complicated and expensive video interview system for talent acquisition if you can use for free Microsoft Teams or Zoom for an interview. Even that for this asynchronous video screening, which basically what does it saying? It's basically saying that you use the interview with record function, yeah, in order to give the interview to various stakeholders. So you don't need, for example, to have 3 interviews asking the same questions. You have one single interview and you are passing that record with agreement of an employee to other people. As well, possibility to do video pre-recorded interview by the candidate. For sure, one of the area which is growing is the area of online simulations. What are these online simulations? They are simulations which try to replicate the real job. There are a lot of examples now, if you look on the YouTube, for example, of how to build a computer, in which you are playing like in a PC game, and you are doing all the virtual things which you are building, and these are quite popular now. Social media candidate screening. This is something which is quite interesting as a trend, which companies are adopting now and will have medium importance into the future. And basically, it's saying that more and more recruiters are starting to do screening, looking on all your social media thing. There are even tendency to say, for example, in a study from Business News Daily.com, that 47% of employers will not call a person for an interview if they cannot find online source about that person. So more and more employers are starting to looking at all your extent of your social media, yeah, even in areas which are not designated, in fact, for professional, if you want, information. And I think that this is blurring the professional or private boundaries. Besides looking at the LinkedIn profile, which now is becoming like a kind of a second, if you want, profile, it's more common that employers to look at what you post on Facebook. They're looking more and more on things which even on Twitter and on other things. And why not? Maybe into the future you will start to see even on the TikTok, yeah, that people will start to look at all these things. Which is also something which is quite interesting. I think that this will be a conflictual trend between, if you want, the GDPR and the tendency to look more on these things, and also on the candidates, which maybe they will start to post more things which are not from their personal life. Maybe we'll start to look at the invasion of Facebook and Twitter with politically correct things, if you want, in order to accommodate this kind of trend. I think that other trends are more related to the optimization of a site. So still you can see a lot of career sites which are not optimized for mobile usage. So now a lot of applications are made using smartphones, and still there are companies which their site were not right optimized. A lot of trends which are into the cookies and web tracking in order to be able to do geolocation and to do advertising based on a specific region or a type of candidates. And for sure, if you want the latest aspiration and something which is big, if you want, it's a trend which will be very important into the future, and it's on the verge of adopting. It's more and more the technology which will screen automatically your resume. This is something which is happened for a number of years. Basically, what does it mean in relationship with algorithmic assessment? In essence, you have an AI tool, whatever that is a real AI tool or a more simple one, which is matching the language in your profile with a language into the job posting. It's reading, it's parsing your profile, and based of what you wanted to emphasize into the search, it's selecting the candidates and is creating, if you want, tops of candidates based on these things. Personally, I still think that this is a limitation in this kind of tools. And I personally think it's a limitation because at the end of the day, it's based on the language in which you are using in your resume. It cannot see beyond what you wrote there. And to be honest, I personally always encourage my recruiters to spend time and quality time in looking into the profiles, because otherwise it will become just a simple task of matching language with language. I must accept that it's a useful tool when you have a lot of application, when you have thousands of applications. For sure it can work for you better in order to screen a large number of applications. As I said into the tool, sorry, I don't know why my presentation it's out. Just a moment. Hello? Hello again? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Radu.
Radu?
Hello?
Radu.
Okay, I think that it was an interruption.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Now you can hear me well?
Yes. Yes.
Hello?
Te auzim, Radu.
Okay.
We can
Okay.
hear you. Yeah.
All right. Then I'll go back to the presentation. Okay. All right. Just a moment. So I think that these are the areas which now we are talking about the trends into the candidate and new hire in engagement, and you'll see here a different type of trends. So I think it's not a surprise. But I'm having problem with my connection. I will go on my iPhone.
Okay.
Okay, now I think it will be better because I moved to my mobile.
Okay.
Okay, because I think it was a problem with the local internet. Can you see my presentation now? All okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So in this area of candidate and new hire and engagement, I think that as you can see, it's a lot of emphasis on new technologies, but surprisingly, the area of virtual and augmented reality, which you might say that might be of a lot of importance into the future, it's not. So there are some technologies which I think did not yet moved. And I think that it was an early enthusiasm for such technologies, particularly in simulations and showing a lot of things, but they are not yet there. They are not yet there from the point of view of technology. And I think for many companies which started to sell such things, marketing, let's say in politically correct terms, was faster than the reality. Chatbots and candidate persona. What is a kind of persona? It's something which is borrowed from marketing, which basically it's you start to create a focus on your type of candidates you want to build using tools for marketing, like age group, education, years of experience, and also different psychographics. It's much more used now into talent acquisition as a tool. And marketing, I think, is one of the most important contribution which you'll see on the talent acquisition role. Chatbots, even that they fly everywhere, and they are now in experimentation. It's still, I would say, into the infancy. Many people are talking very enthusiastically about chatbots, but as you can see, just 15% of recruitment function now, they're using them. Yeah, which is something interesting because look, when I left IBM in 2018, everybody was at that time talking about when you reach 2020, everything will be transformed. We'll have just chatbots, virtual augmented reality, and other things. It didn't move as we went. Yeah, so it's still here a lot of space for the experimentation. I want to show here, with the permission of my colleague from Dora, the heavy robot, how this is working like a real chatbot. And this is something which now we are experimenting in E-Infra with something like that. So basically, it's a tool which is working using the Facebook as a major tool, and it's posting on Facebook. It's a chatbot, like a virtual assistant for recruitment, which is called Dora. I'm working here on my mobile. I'm choosing my interest into terms of jobs. I'm choosing a specialist in marketing, which is incidentally something which you want now. I'm going into the town. And basically, I'm seeing a marketing specialist. Sorry, this was something which came on my mobile at the time. This is the job which I'm seeing. I'm reading it. I'm applying. It's asking me if I'm interested about the offer. I need to have some experience. So the assistant is asking me how many years I work as a specialist. When did I work? Asking me if I have experience in online. How much time? English. The level of English. It's even asking me if I in agreement with a salary offer. If I'm working here. If I'm living in Bucharest. When can I start as an earliest date? And when a recruiter can call me, for the first contact. So now it's asking me also if they can use my Facebook photo. And this is my personal photo, and I'm giving their permission. And my mobile. And that's basically when the code is coming, and I'm stopping here with all these things. So all this information and many more, which can be configured into the Dora, are going directly to the recruiter. and into the system with already a kind of a pre-screening which is performed on all these searches, which you can imagine that is creating real help and optimizing the entire search. Particularly will be interested now in E-Infra to take this tool, for example, and by this I'm answering also maybe some of the questions what tools we are using here, particularly for selecting and finding workers, because Facebook is an important tool, you know, for finding profiles for these roles. Can we stop a little bit here for some questions in this moment, if there are? Because I think this already a lot of presentation.
Sure. I mean, if you have questions, you can ask them directly or write them on the chat, however you prefer.
Just as a moment to go out, you know, from the formal presentation.
I have one.
Please.
Question. I'm not an expert. I'm not even working in HR, but anyway, I found it very interesting because when I presented myself to various interviews, people were giving me personality tests. Okay. And while I understand vaguely the reason of those personality tests, you said now that they do not represent necessarily the future. So the future in talent acquisition is in other places. Why do you think that the personality test did not explode or went into, you know, this direction of the future?
Okay, so first I think that it's a tendency, it's a kind of conflictual trend now into talent acquisition. On one hand, we wanted to create a lot of tests, if you want, and several filters, but in the same time, an important trend which is happening in the talent acquisition is simplification of application and selection. The name of a game now is drop a CV and bye-bye, yeah? Mm-hmm. And we'll go directly, you know, then if you'll be selected to the interviewing phase. So the need for speed and the need to not complicate the life of the people which are applying created a trend, you know, in which the number of filters and tests to decrease during the time. Yeah, this is one tendency. Second, I think that the tendency which I show with biometrics and other tools create a kind of a lighter version, if you want, than the classical test. And third is the fact that it taking time, you know, and focus to use a lot of tests in quality recruitment and cost, because this type of interventions like personality or cognitive batteries are quite expensive if you want to use on a consistent manner into your process. And finally, I think that it's also a tendency to say personality, diversity. Let's give an example, and I will answer to this thing. Let's say that you are saying we want to recruit people which are fitting to our values, and you will have a type of personality in which you think. This is something which is very controversial in our days, because we are encouraging at the end of the day diversity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's important to understand the personality of a candidate in order to accommodate them into the proper roles. I think it's important for the personal development. It's important to understand the particular strengths and weaknesses. But I don't think that will be a trend which will continue with large extent into the future.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
My pleasure. If it's any other question, if not, to return to the presentation. In this stage. Okay, so then I will return to the presentation. All right. All righty. So I talk about the chatbots. I talk about all these things. Now, in terms of social recruiting area, I think that, and I think, as I said, I announced from the beginning, the old LinkedIn is still there, and it will continue to be there, in spite of all the evolutions into the job boards and different ways. LinkedIn, it will continue to play an important role into the future. Job boards. This is something which I want to comment a bit. Even from 5 to 6 years ago, the trends and the communication about them said that the job boards will die, that we will not see any more job boards, that it's an ineffective way of doing recruitment, and this very much because the majority of talent acquisition will be focused on direct search. So, and LinkedIn and Facebook, and we don't need any more of these job boards, which I think that it was an early assumptions. Job boards are still there, as you can see, even in Romania. You can see things like Best Jobs, Easy Jobs, Hypo, and other type of things. And I think that partially the reason why they are still there, even that here we've read it saying that they will play little importance into the future, is because themselves the job boards evolved. They are not anymore the classical job boards in which you are posting something and then you vanish. For example, Monster bought the talent bin, so the people aggregator, which I told you into the first slide. So now it's a kind of tendency to aggregate, to mix. You have classical job boards mixed with very sophisticated people aggregator systems, which are doing algorithm and search and databases. So I think that still job boards are there. Glassdoor, as you see, it's an important tool for social recruiting, particularly in terms of reputation of companies. Interesting enough, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat, which basically Snapchat, it's the preferred, if you want, communicator for younger generation. They are not so big, and they are not into the trends from Gartner shown to be very big into the future. People aggregator, as I show you into the first slide, there are things which are considered to be more important into the future, like Talentbin and other companies. One personal comment which I had in practice, because I used some people aggregator into the past, like Guild. I think one of the problem with them is that they are still very used into the IT industry from where they start, not so much into our field yet. And also they tend to start first in US, then in UK, a bit of Netherlands. So when you are looking in countries like Romania or Central or Eastern Europe, the number of profiles which they aggregate is not so rich. Talent sharing platform is something quite interesting, which is a trend we started quite recently. Basically what it's saying, you are using a platform in which when you have, for example, peaks and lows, and you don't need some of your talent in the organization, you can rent the talent from the inside of the organization on these platforms and even make some money. So not only that you are not firing your people on that low moments and other things, but you can even make some money of sharing your talent on these platforms. This is something which I wanted, however, to show you something which is quite interesting. That's why talent acquisition is an area which is full of paradoxes somehow. Now you can see the presentation because I'm getting a message that we cannot see the presentation, or it's an.
I can see the presentation.
Okay. Maybe it's something which. So basically, this is a slide which is older. It's from 2017. But to be honest, I didn't find a version which is newer than that. And I'm following this type of slides from 2005. And I can tell you that from 2005 to 2017, I didn't notice significant changes on this graphic. Basically, what it's saying what is the usage from the candidate point of view of different recruitment channels or networks, and the influence on that channel is having on the candidate. In other words, do I trust so much that channel in which I'm applying? And you'll see that after so many years, of evolution of applicant tracking systems, career sites, referral programs, people aggregators of calling, one of the most used, in fact, network, and with the highest credibility in terms of influence, is still something very traditional, which are the friends and family, which is quite surprising if you think, because the dream of a company was to see, for example, their career site having one of the most, in fact, high usage, from the point of view of things, and also to be high in influence, You are going on the official career site of a company, and you get all the information from there. But from the research point of view, it seems that information on people in which you trust, friends, family, and then job advertisement through third-party online job boards. So look again, job boards are still there, this including also LinkedIn, to be honest, and Facebook. Then current employees of an organization, look why it's important to keep your employee happy, because they will be, in fact, very often source of information about jobs and also credibility about the company. That's why employee referral, it's a significant channel which needs to be used and continue to be used into the future. We have quite high number now in the E-Infra, and in IBM, we reach a level of almost 50% of our hiring in Central Eastern Europe come through referrals by our employees, paid and not paid. So this is saying something. Now, I want to give a clear image to not create a confusion here. When I'm saying friend and family, that doesn't mean that they are not subject of digitization. Basically, it's saying that your friends and family can be targeted a lot by the modern platform in the digitization, but they are still into the center of usage of finding jobs and having credibility. And I think that this is a powerful insight. As I told you, in 10 years, I didn't saw this graphic moving significantly. So that's why I don't believe that it will move also into the future too much. I think that another area which I think that I don't know how we're looking with the time. I think we are quite late. I'll try to move a little bit faster into the things. I have a tendency to
if you can finish in 10 minutes, and then we will wrap up and have the questions.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I think that one of things which also it's important to take into consideration is the talent myth. And what I'm saying by this, I think that a lot of organization and managers and recruiters are saying we want the best from the best. In other words, that we want the highest talent from the market in which we are taking. And I think that let's look a little bit of this. This is an example of a classical grid 9x9 in which we are looking at the talent population in an organization. And this is an example from my old company, from SIB Miller, how we looked, for example, into this area. And basically what it's saying, we are putting on one axis the performance of the people, and on another axis the potential of those people. And for example, high performance, high potential will be the quadrant of high flyer and major leaguer. People which are considered that they are low performance and low potential to grow will be into the corner of negatively plateau, and so on. Many companies are using this kind of grids with different names and different things. So basically, a lot of people into the search and managers, they are saying that they want to bring from the market the people which are high flyer and major leaguer. And now I'm asking you, what do you think that if you bring in a company just people which are high flyer and major leaguer? So let's say that you create a company which is from the best people from the market on this type of analysis in terms of high performance estimated and potential. And I think that it's easy to answer that, even if it sounds to say, wow, but in the majority of companies, you realize that in fact, you don't need such a high proportion. Because if you have such a high proportion, you'll have a terrible problem of succession planning. Because the biggest keyword, which is for these people, is basically their high flyer or major leaguer, is that they need to promote quite fast. Yeah. And no company can have such a space to accommodate such a high number of people. It's also depending on the type of company, development speed, and in which moment into these things. So this cannot be an aspiration that you want to take the best people from the market as an always, if you want, kind of aspiration. For sure, if you have a kind of negative things, like a kind of split between high flyers and negatively, you don't want also to take the worst people from the market. This is equal true, yeah? And this is not the right strategy. So what I'm thinking is that, and I think this is an important message to give to managers and to people which want to recruit. You need people which at least will be fit for your role into the companies. You need a kind of a balance for sure. You don't want to take necessarily people which are with low estimated performance. This is not something which you want to do. But you need people in all the corners. You need people which sometimes maybe they don't have too much space to grow, but they are a good performer. And you need as well people which will be into the high flyer. So this is like, if you want, like a kind of message that it's a trap to say that always that you need the best talented and the best people from the market. You need a balanced way in which to fill in your companies. Another thing which I think is happening now as a tendency which is affecting the talent acquisition is the agile. And I will move quite fast through this slide. So basically, agile was something which is created in 2001. And in essence, it started like a way to do a different way in articulating your software development, with an accent which was put on the values, on the working software, on the individuals and interaction versus the formal way of doing processes and tools. Basically, agile at the origin was a mix of different things coming from Scrum, from extreme programming, from others, it's reusing, in fact, some things from lean manufacturing, from lean thinking, from all the Six Sigma and other techniques on the things. And the question mark is, what is the difference, in fact, into the origin, how we are doing, in fact, agile versus the waterfall? And I think that the quick answer is that in the classical production, for example, of software, you are doing step by step. First, you are moving in the requirements, then into the design, then into the testing, and then into the deployment. In agile, you are doing small bits, but working prototypes in sprints. So in each stage, you will have a product which can be improved. So the question then was, and I will not talk now about this team because we don't have more teams. So the question was then, can we apply this kind of agile methodology, in fact, also to the HR and particularly to the talent acquisition? And I think that the answer is yes, because many processes into HR, they have this kind of sequential, if you want, order. They have bottlenecks, they have dependencies, and particular the talent acquisition. That's why when I was in IBM, I was the subject and champion, you know, of moving agile principle into the talent acquisition. So basically, what is the practical usage of agile principles in talent acquisition? You are starting from a talent demand, which is prioritized to death. It's starting from a principle that not all jobs are important. You are doing a quite of selection which are the most important roles to be done. And by this, you are doing a sprint prioritization in working for jobs which can be done quickly and with a maximum impact for your customer. Also part of this practice, it's the daily stand-ups or daily scrum meetings in which the team acquisition meetings is looking at the progress each day. Yeah. And time to time, it's inviting customer into the process. So it's something which I saw being done. I think it's quite an effective, process, and you'll see more and more, I think, into the future application of agile methodologies and technologies into the talent acquisition. A couple of words about COVID-19 impact, and then I have just one more slide and I will stop. I think that what COVID brought a bit of a mix of bad and hopefully good news. For sure, over the world, you can see a significant decrease of job posting at global level. There are few exceptions. France and Germany were showing a recovery versus the February 2020, but in the rest of the country, it's a difference of minus 40%, 50%, 30%. Allegedly, it's an accelerated usage of technology. I'm saying allegedly because, let's be honest, the single dominant technology which was accelerated, it's the video technology, the usage of video interviews, of remote things. But I don't think yet that you can say that this accelerated also the trends which I presented to you now. It's a pressure on existing budget, which is affecting negatively, in fact, the adoption of technologies. Might be as well a cost opportunity in negotiating better prices. And I think that something which is happening now on the market, it's a perception that the market is tilted now more in the favor of employers, in a sense that it's less, for example, emphasizing on the demand of critical skills, that the applications which are looking at people experiences, it's in lower interest now. But I think that this is something which I don't believe. I think this is, you can see already that the critical skills are still critical skills. And I don't think that COVID will influence so much the biggest trends into the talent acquisition. Finally, and is my last slide, which then I will invite for debate and for questions. I think what I'm calling the hard problem of AI, and in simple terms is, do I believe that in few years, the majority of our technology and selection process will be dominated by the AI, or we'll still see the role of a recruiter and human judgment? And personally, I think that we hit a wall. If you look at the majority of the companies which are selling AI technologies now, the majority of them in 2017, 2018, they were very enthusiastic. Now it's more silence, and it's more responsible silence. Because, and I will go out from this presentation because I want to see you in person, because I think that whatever good will be the technologies and the artificial intelligence and everything, we still have a lot of things to do in developing our theoretical background in understanding particularly the talent equation. Why am I saying this? We are still not understanding fully what is the perfect ingredient in terms of candidates. What is the method, the perfect method to select the perfect candidates? And based on what? On which criteria? On the performance rating after 1 year? On the short-term attrition? We still don't understand, in fact, we don't have a precise algorithm of how is to select people which will provide performance in our companies. It's still a matter of judgment. And I think that a lot of algorithms which are used into the modern talent acquisition in artificial intelligence are using old theories. Try to imagine, for example, just for a while, that you are trying to understand the motivation at selection using the Maslow pyramid. Are you kidding? Which is a tool which is, from the scientific point of view, it doesn't have quite a high relevance. Yeah? So what I'm saying is, right, I think that the AI will bring a huge contribution into the day in which we'll understand also by big data and analytics, will have much powerful insights of what are the real ingredients of a talent equation. Thank you very much, and I will stop here for questions and comments. Sorry for my extended time.
Thank you very much. It was very, very interesting. We also received a question via email, and I wrote it on chat. So the question is, in recent years, Romania has faced a labor force crisis, both qualified and unqualified. Has the pandemic changed this situation in any way? And if so, in what sense?
I think that I already said that in some extent, all over the world, with few exceptions, we saw a contraction of labor. Yeah. If you look also at the unemployment figures and all the things, is definitely higher than in the past. But in absolute terms, let's be honest, 5.6, which are the latest numbers in unemployment, is nothing in terms of a real unemployment figure. In economic textbook, it's saying that an unemployment which is lower than 4% is nothing. Yeah. And I think it's a deficit still into the skills job. There are sectors which are much more hit than others. But let's be honest, which are the biggest sectors which are affected now by pandemic, or will be with a closure again of restaurants and bars and pubs and other things. Are you using in IT industry or automotive or engineers or construction? Are you using a lot of people coming from bars and restaurants? I guess not. Yeah. So I think that in the industries in which we are operating, we need a more, if you want, specified, a more specific angle. And I don't think that we are in a better situation than before. It's a matter of perception, I would say, and something which I think it's also quite important. Employees will penalize the employers which are now taking a lot of advantage in a market which might create, let's say, some temporary advantage things. I saw this also into the crisis in 2009 and 2010. When the best companies were the one which were able to keep the balance, not the companies which lavished their employees before the crisis with a lot of things and had a good behavior, and then during the crisis they tilted the face and behaved sometime in an irresponsible manner. I believe very much in consistency and balance.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have another question from Mariana. Mariana, if you'd like, you can ask.
Yeah, sure. Yes, no, I just wanted to see what you think about, talent acquisition, the difference between, with regard to talent acquisition, and in fact, possibly even talent management, within larger and smaller SME companies. Your experience in Romania is probably very useful here, but elsewhere as well, what your perceptions are, appreciation is of this difference. Thank you.
So definitely scale is playing a role. If you are in IBM and you hire 8,000 hires per year, or even in a country, I had Poland with 2,000 hires per year, for sure it's a difference than being in a company which is doing 50 hires per year or 20 hires per year. And as I talk in my presentation about segmentation of roles into the talent acquisition, you don't have 100 recruiters, you have one. You cannot afford the luxury to specialize between all these things. I think, however, and this will be a surprising answer, I think that it's a level of advantage and flexibility for a smaller company. And I'm including into this class of smaller company if I'm I'm comparing, for example, my current company with a big company, we have hundreds of thousands. It's that the larger corporations, many times they are stuck into global contracts. And I'm giving a practical example. In IBM, for example, we used Kenexa because it was our own product, which we sold also to the customers. It was almost impossible, for example, into a micro market or into a country to buy yourself biometrics or to play with different technology and to play to the different things. Many times the game was how to persuade the global or the regional teams to accommodate some local region. Very hard game, very long term, and with low degree of success. Also, the fact that the cost for applications, which are not anymore the biggest applicant tracking systems into the world, decreased during the years. It's putting the local companies and smaller companies into a very interesting position in which they can go on the market. They can go like buying on Amazon, yeah, and they can select the most innovative and interesting application into the market into a way which bigger corporation cannot afford. Not because they don't have the money, or resources or capability, because we are still stuck into the model of large implementation of big programs worldwide and all the same. So I think that I'm seeing a lot of space for these companies. And to be honest, I think that in my last 2 years in this role, I experimented with many more technologies that I experimented in my time of IBM. I don't know if I answered specifically to your question, or it was a different one. Also, just an additional answer, I think an important addition to the technology into the last 5 years is the change into the pricing model. The past was like this. You spent a lot of money buying an entire infrastructure of IT installing in your company. And you remain stuck with that, which was expensive. It was not variable used. You spend the same amount of money if you hire 1,000 employees per year or just one. Yeah, and it was very cumbersome. Now, the majority of applications into the world are using the model of pricing as product as a service, yeah, SaaS. So basically, there are a lot of applications which you are paying per usage. You are paying for numbers of hiring. They can sell you the platform at a basic usage, as a minimum, for example, of just 2 recruiters per month, or even not with 0, and you are paying per hiring. So this can accommodate, for example, even small companies, yeah, which they hire just 5 per year, but then they're using a revolutionary platform just for the cost per hiring.
Thank you very much. I think we can move on. We have other questions in the chat. One from Stefan Mezaros. He's a student now enrolled in the MBA program. Stefan, would you like to address the question, or maybe I can read it? How do you prefer?
You can read it if you want. I have nothing against.
Okay, so I'll read it. So, has the second wave of the pandemic, what is your opinion in the context of talent acquisition regarding the hype of downsizing embraced by more and more companies as a strategy for 2021?
So basically, if I understood correctly, it's about the effect of the pandemic again, about the economy. Now, look, I don't want to sound like a prophet and other things. It's an old quote which I'm always using, and it's saying, and it's a half joke. Forecasting is difficult, especially for one about future, yeah, which is a joke in itself. Nobody knows what will be exactly the effect on the pandemic of the economy and what is the crisis. When we started the crisis, even in our company, we said that we estimated a number of 10 months in which the things will be different versus the business as usual. I think it differs by industry. You can see already that the transportation industry, tourism, and other things, they are hit, and the recovery time for these industries will be maybe in years. Yeah. So not in months. You might expect 2022 to see some industries coming back. And this will have an effect. By the way, about this, I joked at the beginning that, but it's true. There are a lot of subjects now into the HR conferences about the behavior of working from home and how this will impact the future of working and what will happen. I think it's an interesting trend. Personally, however, I think that to give an answer also on this question, if it will be of working from home, personally, I think that it's too early to say that the entire universe of work, it will move to a kind of work from home thing. It's too early. And I'm not speaking just from books and theories. I must disclose that I work for 4 years from home in IBM, so I know what I'm speaking. I know how it is to work from home. I know which are the resistances and difficulties. I think that when the things will come to normal, for sure work from home will remain here as a practice, but it will be more seen like a facility. It will be more like an benefit. It will be more like something which you can choose to. And I think that this is the most powerful element. When I work from home for 4 years, to be honest, let me tell you that it was not fun, because now the work going to office was moved to home and I was not able to choose. I had nowhere to go to office. I think it's the primary, in fact, value of working from home. It's in fact that you can change your habit. And it will be perfect if you can choose to work from home in some days, and then in some days to work from office. Not on one decision, which will say absolutely I will work from one side to another.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Rareș Popescu, who's an alumni from our program. So he wrote, Jim Collins says, before you start the bus, put the right people in the right seat. But on digital transformation and enterprise business IT architectures, implementations, especially on entrepreneurial family businesses, you have no time and immediate resources to bring into in order to successfully deliver the programs in an efficient manner. What kind of diagnosis do you think is the most easier to try from start? A cultural diagnosis? A well-being team analysis? These are just my first thoughts.
Okay. So maybe you want to elaborate a bit, please. What is your question? I understand the introduction with Jim Collins and all the things, but to understand exactly what you want me to answer.
Hi.
Hi, Rareș.
Hi. So I mean, I'm an IT guy. I'm an IT professional, and I'm working in enterprise architecture. So it's not my first call to make a team analysis in the organization, but also I have a secondary degree in psychology, organizational psychology license, and okay. I know that it's basically one of the major success factors in the implementation of such programs. But I cannot do that because I enter like IT consultant. I cannot do both because it's a great it's a big business to do HR transformation. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how can I mix the things from the start? Even if I have no resources on the client side, what can I do? And what analysis could I do in order to bring up the team at its best? This is the question. It was I'm in such a program now, and it was a spontaneous question, basically.
Yeah, I think that to transform an organization is not necessarily you need to have luxury of resources from a large enterprise and all those things. And I think that the first, maybe more important things that if you are quoting classics like Jim Collins, I think that we can also call it what said Peter Drucker, and I think this is an important start, that culture, it's eating strategy, at lunch and all the things. And I think this is something which is very important to be understood also by the entrepreneurial organization, even more than the big corporations.
Okay.
That culture is equally important, is not a fancy word. And I think that sometimes we are scaring the business people by using the jargon and language of HR. And you are saying organizational culture, and the business say, what the hell is this culture stuff and things? These are mumbo jumbo poetry.
It's one of my favorite quotation that culture is strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But they don't understand. It's not something that it's easier to understand. It's like, sometimes it's like speaking with my little kid about something complicated for him. They don't understand, actually.
It's what, if you want, and I like that you are saying that you enjoy psychology and other things. I finished psychology is my first degree. And I think that what is fascinating about organization is that they have their own life.
Yeah.
They behave like brands, like consumer brands. And sometimes you are doing all the right things from the rational point of view. You have a good organization, you recruit the highest talent from the market, you are paying well, you are doing everything, everything what is right from the book. But you cannot move your organization, and you don't understand why. Even that, and you don't yet, and you cannot fix it because organizations are complicating animals. They are very much subjects to gravitation, if you want. When you move from 50 people to 100 people to 500 people, they're acting on different rules.
And family gravity mostly.
The
entrepreneur.
And I think, and I will finish here with this answer for this subject. I think that for the world in which we are working, and also for our organization in which I'm working, I think it's essential to understand when you reach, for example, a number like 500 employees, you need to behave like any corporate into the world.
Correct.
You cannot create artificial rules. There is no Romanian management specific, like is not Pakistani or Greek things. It's a single code, and this is what we need to follow if you want to succeed.
Yes, I was thinking about a parallel program in which we shape the organization along with shaping transformation, digital transformation, especially I'm talking about like an organizational transformation, okay, in parallel with digital transformation, but without resources. So something like this something which I could make from start as an IT consultant.
Okay.
This was the idea. It's something like a side product,
Yeah. Now, just a comment, like trivia. Moving to the second questions.
I want to add something here, if it's possible.
Please.
A comment. I'm Angela. So I wanted to add that regarding changes, I am from a small organization. We still small HR company, and we just launched an HR online shop. It took me 2 years to convince my small team of 3 persons that this is okay. So the idea was in November 2018, and now, so 3 months ago, one of my team members came with the idea of the product that is most sold now. So you just need to bring it on to find occasions, but it will take time. So if for my team of 3 took 2 years, I imagine for a bigger team, but just have courage and they will build on after.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, and just talking about classics, we are into a world where it's hard to be right each time. I remember Jim Collins' Built to Last, and the companies which are in his book, like GE, which was one of example of the company which was built to last, which we saw the problems in the last years, and things is harder, to be right now in our terms about the evolution of the companies. I saw here a questions saying, have you done research within your company if you have lost any talented applicant due to applicant tracking system? It's from Yonuts B. Yeah. Look, that's why I already gave a type of hint that now we are into a fight between two tendencies. One is to deploy such sophisticated applicant tracking systems in which we want to find a lot of things about candidates, which will help us then to target, to use all this information and to do a lot of selection and other things. And in the same time, we want to simplify the process. And we have insights that the candidates don't want to spend time in long-term application. They want to drop the CV and run. And I think that we need to take in consideration this kind of trend. I myself, to be honest, I dislike when I'm applying for a job to see a cumbersome, complicated process and other things. I dislike to see applicant tracking systems which are not recognizing the template of my CV. And then they ask me to rearrange in thousands of things. And I think that the first image of an organization, the first contact which you have with that organization, is how your applicant tracking system is looking. So if you see something which is looking dusty, which is complicated, which is asking you a lot of stupid questions, or you don't understand, for sure it might create an adverse effect on your application rate. In the same time, I think it's equal that you want, if it's possible, before to enter into interviews and all the process, to have a number of information about the candidates. That's why, and I didn't talk about this, I just want to give a 1-minute answer. I think that the future is very much about, not about the candidates. I think that the future, and I will make now my own prophecy. I don't know when, maybe in the next 10 years. Due to the proliferation of a social media information, people aggregators, and a lot of availability of data, I think that the majority of recruiters, they will know already potentially about the majority of the candidates in the market. So in other words, the problem will not be about who is Radu and what he did and his competence and his profile. By the way, Pymetrics, if you did one time the test on their profile, on their platform, and you accept to offer your assessment, if you are going to another company which is having a contract with Pymetrics, you are not doing the test anymore. They will have already from Pymetrics with your agreement the profile which you did a few years ago, which is an interesting trend. I can give you a practical example when I saw this happening and why I'm thinking that this is the future. I had in one moment a very complicated task when I work in IBM to recruit a number of consultants in Workday, in Germany, Netherlands, and UK. Workday, it's a technology which is not so now developed in terms of number of consultants like SAP, for example. So there are few people working in Workday, for example, than in Oracle or in SAP. But the task was not about finding those people. can you imagine that in both, in all countries, in UK, in Germany, and in Netherlands, we knew already the people which are certified in Workday, all of them. We have a list of all of them. There were 470 in UK, 50 in Germany, and 70 in Netherlands, with name, with addresses, with profiles, with everything. So the problem was not to find them. The problem was to pick up the phone or the email or the chat or whatever, and to engage them and persuade them to come to work for us. I think that this is the future of recruitment. Sooner or later, our information about candidates will be so good that you can know already who are the candidates from the market. But then we'll go back in cycle and we'll go to the old days of recruitment, in which you need to convince and persuade these people.
Stai un pic să închid și eu.
Sorry, Adi, did you have a question for me?
I don't think so.
Adi, te sunase mai devreme.
Da.
Pentru că
Adi, ai microfonul deschis.
He muted now.
Okay. All right. Any other question?
Well, there is a question from Angela. Angela, would you like to address it?
Okay, yes. So regarding the HR platforms you talked about before, SaaS, can you give your input regarding some relevant ones, the most popular or efficient?
Look, it's something which I prefer to not, and I will tell you why.
It's a commercial, I know, but
Yeah,
maybe I will ask you. Okay, can I ask you after or not?
yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that you raise a very important question, which I also said in the beginning of the presentation. There are literally thousands, if not 10,000 now, competitive platforms worldwide on everything, on all the segments, if you want. And to be honest, platforms which are decent, platforms which can operate from country to country, so they don't need necessarily to be into the same country, with different pricing models which can accommodate a lot of things. So a real question is, how can you assess, in fact, the quality of them and compare so many, in fact, products on the market? So many. So my single advice, to be honest, on this area is try few of them. Try few of them, whatever you'll find on the net. Put them to the test. A lot of them have, in fact, the structure of pricing by SaaS. So you are not dead duck with them for long term if you don't like it. Sorry if it's any provider of technology on the call. Use them, and if you don't like them, change them.
Okay.
Don't go for big implementation heavy ones.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay. I'm not hearing you. I think that you are on mute.
Sorry, we don't have any other questions written on chat, but if
maybe, yeah.
Sure.
I would have a question regarding what I said before. So we launched 1 year ago, 2 years ago was the idea. 1 year ago it was live, an online HR shop. Have you seen this trend? Have you seen this type of shops? Do you have an insight about this?
what is doing this type of shop?
So we offer services for employers and also for employees. So the ones which are looking for a job or advisory regarding CV or many others. So do you have an opinion regarding this trend in Romanian world or whatever?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the latest, if you want, trend, as I said, is going on this area of people experience. And people experience, it's a term borrowed, in fact, from marketing, in which we are looking at moments that matters. And HR more and more, they borrow these things as moments that matters. And they're designing, in fact, customized packages for these moments that matters, including, in fact, evolution into the career, how to position yourself on the market. There are many of these people experiences, for example, site in which you are going on this site, and they are teaching you how to prepare for the interview with them, yeah, in order to have a better chance to have a successful landing on that company. So I think that you'll see an evolution into the next time of this career site, which are going to help you even to land a better job and equip you with some skills, even at different companies than one you apply. Yeah. By the way, nobody asked me, I don't know if it's any interest about KPIs, which are the most used KPIs into the talent acquisition. And this will be my last statement, if you don't have any other other questions. So now, depend from organization to the organization, but
Radu, are you still with us? I think Radu has an internet connection problem.
Sorry, we are
Yes.
back. My telephone died. My telephone died, so I moved back to network. Yeah, a lot of things. So the most important KPI, which it's also is cost per. It sounds dull, but it's a critical, in fact, KPI. So basically, what it's saying is that I want to measure and to improve the cost per hire. How can I do that? For sure, if I'm having a higher volume, it's simple. But basically, the cost element, it's the most important one. And few years ago, I had a presentation in Cluj and in other parts of Romania with a title, How to Create a Recruitment Department with Zero Agency Cost. Sorry for my colleagues in agency, but I think that it's possible to do something like that. So to work without agencies. Agencies are the higher cost, which a recruitment department can have. So cost per hire is an important one. Then is time to hire, which basically you are measuring the time from the moment of opening your requisition to the moment of hiring. And mostly you are measuring the time between the moment of publishing your requisition to the moment of offering, because time to join might differ in terms of notice period and all these things. And you can cut that time to hire on different segments. What is the time until you publish the requisition, until you have the screening process? What is the time of the screening process? What is the interviewing time? Interviewing to offer. So you can have a lot of information on time to hire of all the things. Then a critical, in my opinion, metric, it's rate of decline. So from offers which are made, how many are declined? This is a killing KPI. Why I'm saying killing KPI? Because try to imagine, particularly when you have few candidates, if you miss the offer, you need to start again. You don't have a luxury many times to have backup candidates. So you need to go back to the stage of search, go again on the market, which is creating more delay into the time to hire. So, and honestly, I saw a lot of employers which they are trying to say, let's try to make this offer. If it works, yes. If not, we'll try again. But this is killing, in fact, your planning and your funnel and your cost. So this is a very important KPI. Then for sure, it's all the funnel channel analysis, which is again a tool borrowed from marketing, in which you are looking in all your channels. What is the number of candidates, cost of channel, how much you spend on LinkedIn, Facebook, agency, Dora, this channel, direct referrals, and other things, how this matter in terms of quality of candidates which are coming. Then the conversion rate, which is also very important in a sense, how many candidates you need to have in order to convert them into eligible candidates, in order to be screened, in order to be interviewed, in order to be converted in offers. Yeah. And you'll start to understand your optimal ratio, yeah, which might differ from company to company. How many people you need to have in your availability, which at the end of the day will transform into a good candidate. Yeah. Then feedback, a lot of metrics which are looking at quality of your hire, in which you are asking your customers, your hiring managers, you are asking, very important, the net promoter score, which can be translated from your candidates in order to assess the quality of your process, the quality of the interviewing, how they felt about all the things. So these are the typical metrics which are used into the talent acquisition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the entire presentation and the discussions we had tonight. I think it was very, very interesting. And oh yeah, we have some comments in the chat. Paula Opera. Paula, are you still with us? Well, I'll read. Thank you for the invitation to this event. It was a very useful presentation. She had to leave, but she joined us, and she was into this. And also, thank you, Radu. So we will publish your presentation on our website, on Transylvania Executive Education website. And of course, if you have any other questions, please contact Radu, or you can contact us, and then we will forward questions to Radu. But it's very good that we have an extraordinary resource. So Radu, thank you for accepting our invitation. People are writing us excellent presentation. Good luck, and glad to meet you. So yeah. And it's also very interesting that we had the MBA community, but also people from outside. So whenever you come to Cluj, you're more than welcome here, of course. Based on the thank you notes we receive, let's put in our agenda that we will have another talk with you in the future.
Thank you very much. With great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for this evening. Keep in touch and follow the Facebook page and LinkedIn page. We will publish there all the news regarding our talks and the follow-up with Radu. Thank you all for this evening, and see you to our next event. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.